we have access on a daily basis to senior leaders and to, I guess, influential decision makers who can make changes in the hiring structure and what they're doing.
Over the last couple of years, we've made sure that as a business, our culture and the service that we offer is a representation of what we want to see in society. So we will be talking to these senior leaders about some of the challenges and getting into detail around some of the initiatives that have been successful and worked for them.
What we really would like to do is kind of normalise the conversation and get people comfortable with having conversations around diversity and inclusion.
Hi Louisa, thanks for joining us today.
Hi Terri, great to be here.
Really great to have you on the show. So this is Louisa Gregory, and today we're going to talk about creating allyship at work. Louisa, I'll kick over to you for the first question to talk us through your fantastic career journey so far and how you got into leading on DE&I.
Well, I always think of myself as having had a bit of a squiggly career, to steal a phrase from the well-known book. I've worked I started in customer service, I guess, and then migrated into HR. Moved back into some more operations and general management, and then found myself landing back into HR. And there wasn't real purpose behind that, other than I just wanted to experience different parts of the business, and I am working my way to link that back into the whole diversity sphere. Because I think that's what diversity is. It's about how you experience different things and how I've experienced how organizations run and how people thrive in them is all part of that experience. I think the other thing for me is that I've had the privilege to live and work on 3 different continents. So I grew up in Australia, I lived in Singapore for 7 years, and I've been in the UK for almost 5. And that's really shaped my experience, particularly living in Asia, in a country like Singapore, which is an absolute melting pot of cultures and ethnicities. And, I had so many local friends as well as foreigners and expats, and, there didn't seem to be much divide. But I guess living in a country like Singapore, you do become aware that not everybody grows up with the same experience, and that there are, biases that exist towards people just because of how they're born or where they're born, or who they love or the color of their skin. So that sort of all shaped my experience. And then when Colt was talking about implementing a formal team and program around what we call inclusion and diversity, I put my hand up and said, I really want to lead this. Please give it to me. And I was quite fortunate that Colt decided to do that. So I've been leading that team since 2019. And looking at how that sort of blends into the way we build our culture, the experience of our employees, and how we manage sort of that change throughout the organisation.
Perfect, thank you. Was there something specific, obviously I think everyone talks about the cultural, I guess the nuances and the things that you pick up and learn from actually moving to different countries. I actually spoke with somebody yesterday and they said a very similar thing. I think they'd grown up and lived in 16 different countries throughout their career, because they were a military family. And obviously that really does impact, I think, how broad your perspective can be and how much more you can think about everybody else. But was there something specific that prompted the move? Obviously your career was a little bit different, I think, before you moved specifically into DE&I. Was there anything that prompted that, or was it just more the wanting to kind of be involved in something so important?
I think for me personally, there was a couple of things. I guess I grew up in a country town in Australia, not in a city, and that brings certain disadvantages to it as well. My parents were caught up in one of the global financial crises that we had. They had interest rates of 13% on their mortgage, and there was just not a lot of money to spare, which meant that I missed out on certain school experiences just because, my parents, through no fault of their own, couldn't afford to do that. I was quite lucky that I got into a really good university. I feel I was quite lucky in terms of the people that I met and the sponsorship and mentoring that they gave me. And I think as you get to your later stages in your career and you realize that actually, if I hadn't had those advantages, if I hadn't met those people, and I think also as a woman, when you see your male peers and colleagues who just seem to, thrive and sort of jump ahead, and you're doing exactly the same things, and you start to recognize the differences that exist. That was definitely a bit of a motivation and a bit of a driver. But also at Colt, two of our values are around, we know people matter, really wanting to make a difference about how we treat people, how we help them to thrive. And another one is we can change the world. And for me, feeding into the whole inclusion and diversity and working with others to create this fairer world is how I live up to that Colt value of we can change the world. So, I guess it was bringing all my accumulated experience to that, and as well as a real passion. But I think some of my past experience in terms of operations and customer service meant that in some respects, I treat this as a business. Because a lot of people, not disrespecting anyone, but they come into this because they're really passionate about, helping Black people to thrive, or, creating a fairer world for people who are LGBTQ+. And for me, it's about everybody. So sometimes you do need to build programs that are just targeted towards women, or sometimes you need to build other programs. So I think sometimes taking that emotion out of it and treating it much more as a business activity can help as well. So I think there was sort of a whole host of things that led me into the space.
Amazing, thank you. So true, isn't it? I think actually sometimes there's probably a bit of lip service that goes on as well in some cases, in terms of, we have to be seen to be doing this, rather than actually really care about how we can be truly inclusive and actually kind of be a bit more commercial in terms of, it doesn't also just apply to one area of a business, it applies to the whole business. And if we get it right everywhere, then obviously hopefully our performance will be much better. So I think, definitely a relation there. And then obviously this podcast today, we're going to talk about allyship, which I think is such a huge thing for us to talk about, and I'm so glad and grateful for you to come on and actually share your insights, so thank you so much. So just kicking off with that particular piece in mind, what for you is the meaning of allyship?
I've used this quote before, and it's just one of my favorite quotes, and I use it particularly when we talk about allyship. And it's a quote by Dr. Seuss, and he said, "Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is ever going to change. It's not." And for me, that's exactly what allyship is, because we can all sit there and think, oh, well, I'm not LGBTQ+. Why should I care about that? It's somebody else's problem to fix, or I'm not Black, so it's not up to me to fix that. But unless someone like me cares a whole awful lot, nothing is ever going to change. So that for me is really what allyship is about. None of us can sit back and think somebody else will fix it for us, because I think in the history of the world, that's how the worst things have been allowed to propagate, because people have seen it as somebody else's problem. So allyship to me just means that you care about creating a fairer world for those people. You don't have to be LGBTQ+ to care about creating equal rights for people who are. You don't have to have a disability in order to, have a real care and concern for how people who are disabled, make their way in the world. I think also it's important to distinguish between that passive and active allyship as well. Passive allies can say, oh, of course I respect everyone, and of course they should all have an equal place in the world. But it really takes that active allyship to have a voice, to stand up, to be very public about it, to make sure that everybody gets that fair chance.
Perfect. And then obviously we're kind of talking about allyship. That was quite more broad in terms of the context, but why is it important in a workplace context?
Again, in a workplace context, it's because there's lots of research and evidence, and you alluded to it before, Terri, and it's becoming more prevalent that the research indicates that teams who are diverse not only are more productive, they're more innovative. Those organisations or firms tend to generate more revenue, and they tend to be more profitable as well. So the research is starting to show that. But unless you create a culture and an environment where those diverse groups can actually thrive, then there is also research to say that you will do more harm than good. And that you will, from an organizational point of view, if that's the idea, if it's a tick box, if it's just we need some women, we need some people who are LGBTQ+, you're actually better off with an homogenous group, because they just won't serve a purpose and won't have a voice and won't be free to speak up. So I think in the workplace, that's why it's really important to create this allyship. Because unless the culture and the environment supports your diverse or less well-represented colleagues, they won't have a chance to thrive, and therefore you won't achieve the benefits of a more diverse culture. Yeah,
and I think obviously, hopefully, the more people do pay attention to allyship and actually create sponsor. You mentioned at the beginning about sponsorship, and I think that's so important. Hopefully, that will lead to a better sense of belonging at work.
Exactly.
You're obviously very heavily embedded in this, and I know that for Colt it's a huge agenda in terms of influencing and building allyship. So what can we do to influence and build allyship from your experience and suggestions at work?
Yeah, we have 4 employee networks, and I think that's a growing space for us. So our 4 networks are Network 25, which is our women's group. We have Pride at Colt, which is our LGBTQ+ community. We have our DAN network, which is our disability awareness network. And then we also have United, which is our cultural awareness network. And for all of those, part of our really key messaging is just join the group to learn more. So you know, and a couple of our groups are more mature. Our Pride and our Network 25 group has been around longer. They're just more established, and they have a great ally network connected with them. Dan and United are a little bit newer, and they're still sort of building themselves and building their base. But one of the things we talk quite a lot about is, you know, Network 25 is a great example that you can be an ally to women in the workplace, but many of our men have wives, they have sisters, they have daughters, they have aunts, they have, you know, women in their lives. And often they come along because they want to understand, you know, how they can support the women better in their lives, particularly their daughters that they want to see, you know, entering the workplace and thriving. So one example is we've just launched our Menopause at Work support program, resource and toolkit. And again, our male allies will be exposed to that. And that's an important thing for them to understand, to support not just the women at work, but the women in the rest of their lives as well. So our employee networks are really, really key to building allyship.
Yeah, amazing. Just on that, how, and this probably leads on to the next question actually, but are there any integrations you can suggest to help others build allyship within their organisation? But I'd also link that with terms of, obviously, with your networks, how have you gone about that? Have you just said it's open to all and people can just join the group? Or just if you could share a little bit more around that, I think it'd be quite useful.
Our networks are employee-led, so we as an organisation, as Colt, we don't make the decision about which networks. It's about the people themselves who want to form that network, and then we give them the tools, the framework, the structure, and a very small budget to help them to build that. Yeah, I think it's really important that they sort of control that, and they sort of have their own governance and their own sort of ways of working. And sorry, I've forgotten the second part of
and
your
then the
question.
other bit was, yeah, no, don't worry. So it's more about, so obviously that's one area with the employee networks, and amazing. And hopefully everybody, if they're not doing that, that's something that people can go away and use as a takeaway for this. But are there any other integrations that you can suggest?
Oh, integrations, sorry, yes.
No
so we do a lot of training at work. We have our e-learning platform has a whole inclusion and diversity community that's within it. We have a lot of the training there. At Colt, we've purposely made the decision that as part of our mandatory training program, that both unconscious bias and respect at work are two of the mandatory training courses that all of our employees must complete every year, because we think it's really important to help them to, understand the experience and what we all come to the table with. We do a lot of training for just our diverse groups, and don't apologize that we do have some really targeted programs towards more of our diverse groups. And then we're becoming more conscious about really trying to make sure that whenever we get an opportunity to showcase people, that it's not always the same people, that we're bringing, different voices from all levels of the organization to have those conversations. So I think, exposing those diverse groups to the organization again helps allies, whether they realize it or not, they're actually being made aware and educated in that as well. And then the third thing that I would say is we do, it's a new space for us, and we're sort of building our competency there, but we're starting to partner with some external groups as well. So we partner with the Girls Network, and we send around about 10 Colt women to mentor disadvantaged girls in London for a school year. So we're sort of building more of that as well. And again, that's another great way to build allyship, because, when you're mentoring a 16-year-old girl who's come from a disadvantaged background, you get exposed to just different ways of thinking. And
it's good learning for both sides, I imagine.
Exactly,
Not just a one-way street, that is it. Well, thank you, Louisa. That's so amazing. I think there's lots here that people can take away for sure. Is there anything else that you would like to share? Have we covered everything that you wanted to cover?
I think the one other thing, obviously people have to have the will to be an ally. It's not something, and we don't instruct our employees that they must be an ally, but we certainly encourage them to think about that. I think often people come to this whole, inclusion and diversity or DEI journey fearing that there'll be losers in that, and there just isn't. There are no losers in a more fair and equitable world. And I think one of the ways that we encourage our people is to give them resources. There's so much that's on YouTube, on TED Talks, books, even Netflix. There's some great things on Prime and Netflix and all those sort of streaming channels that can help you sort of build more awareness. So, we sort of drop those resources in to people as well, just to help them to build that capability.
Well, it's I said to you before we kind of actually click play on this, didn't I, in terms of even my naivety around where I've got gaps in my knowledge, and actually educating yourself and taking your time to actually be able to have conversations with everybody across all different groups and backgrounds, and actually feel like I've taken the time to get to know and to understand the different areas. I think we will all have that opportunity, don't we? Especially so amazing that at Colt you're kind of literally handing that on a plate to people. So hopefully that means that even, as you say, even if it's just one episode of something, there is a bit of learning going on there.
Exactly. Sure. Yeah, I mean, The Handmaid's Tale, it's about what happens when women are, relegated to, there's just so much messaging within some of these drama series even.
Yeah, very true. Well, thank you so much. The last question, because obviously it's our DEI Bucket List podcast series. Is there anything on your personal bucket list that you'd like to tick off?
So obviously, Terri, you told me this question was coming, so I've given it quite a lot of thought. And the first thing that came to mind was travel, and I think that's just because we've had so little of it, obviously, in the last 18 months. And, you know, there was the Northern Lights, or the pyramids of Egypt, or Machu Picchu, and there's all these things. And then I thought, well, our topic's allyship. And, you know, it's the small things that can really sort of help make change. So what was really interesting is just you asking me that question actually prompted me to do something about two things that were on my bucket list.
Good.
So one is, I've always wanted to learn to inline skate. So skates are now ordered, they're on their way, and I'm going to be learning to inline skate. I've booked lessons, the whole lot. So just you prompting it asking me has prompted me to do something. And then the second thing, again, just a really, really minor thing, but I'm going to be making my first blood donation in a couple of weeks. So again, another sort of thing that's been on my bucket list, and now I've taken action. So small things can really sort of make a big difference.
Really, really can. I'm a big advocate for blood donoring, so you'll be fine. Just make sure you have the biscuit.
Looking forward to the biscuit after.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Louisa, for talking all about allyship today. Really appreciate it, and so great to have you on. Hopefully we can reconnect soon.
Great.
Thanks very much. Have a great day.
Thanks so much, Terri. It was a great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. No problem. Bye.
Bye.